Hey, it's Pastor Dave Schreffler. I'm the pastor at Zion Lutheran Church in Hummelstown. I have moved in my ministry, and so this is my first Gander at the Gospel as the pastor at Zion Lutheran Church. Uh, I do a Gander at the Gospel. It's a chance to take a look at the Gospel lesson to see where God might be calling us through the words of the Gospel for the Sunday coming up. This is going to be the 19th Sunday in Pentecost. And the lesson comes to us from the Gospel of St. Matthew, the 22nd chapter, verses 1 to 14. Once more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe, and he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot, and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" The Gospel of the Lord. If you ask any pastor what is the thing that they least like about being a pastor, oftentimes the pastor may say weddings. Weddings are the one thing that they least enjoy. Not for this pastor. I love weddings. I love weddings because not only do I get a chance to meet great people and to explore many different areas of their relationship and their relationship with each other and their relationship with God, but I find it almost humorous how nervous couples are when they get to the wedding day. You know, after all the planning, after all the counseling, after all of the things that we have done to prepare, when I'm standing in front of the couple and reciting or reading the vows and just going through the parts of the service, most of them look like they're facing a firing squad. They're that nervous. And so part of my job is to get them to laugh and to smile and to just enjoy this day, to have fun. That's what weddings are about, besides the two coming together as one. But they should be fun occasions. And because they have gone through all the pain of the planning and the planning the event and getting the food and the cost of it, many just look beyond the ceremony itself just to get to the end. Weddings should be memorable. They should be fun. It should be a day that is surrounded by friends and family, and they're making these vows in front of God. So they get all dressed up, shouldn't, because they want to look the part, right? And feel blessed on their wedding day. But often, in my experience, weddings are also an invitation for disaster. There was a wedding that my wife and I attended many years ago. It was a friend of mine from the Blue Band. He asked me if I would play the trumpet at his wedding. And so we get there for the rehearsal, and there's a soloist who's going to be singing the Lord's Prayer. A young man going to a very prestigious school for singing, and he sort of went on and on about the different groups that he sings with, and just, he was sort of singing his own praises, let's say. So we get to the event, get to the wedding. I played my part at the very beginning. It was time for Holy Communion. And the soloist was singing the Lord's Prayer. So we got through the words of institution. The soloist began to sing. I was kneeling at the altar. He was right behind me, right next to a trap set, a drum set. And he starts the first line, and all of a sudden there's silence, and I hear a cymbal crash. And here the poor young man had passed out. He had psyched himself out so much that he passed out and fell into the cymbals of the drum set. There are many memorable weddings that I have had that are going to go into the book that I'm going to write one day. But in our gospel lesson today, a king is throwing a wedding. He's throwing a wedding banquet. He's throwing a party for his son. And, this was the kind of event that in those days, it was an honor to be invited by the king. I mean, you were part of the honorable ones if you were invited. It would be the equivalent today of being invited to the White House for dinner. That's kind of how I feel about it. And if you're invited to such an event, you cancel everything on your schedule. You make sure you have nothing else to do, and you are going to be there. There's not another event that is going to supersede going to such an invitation. Anyway, and when you go, you need to be prepared. So we have to wonder, this parable that Jesus tells, this is also the wedding banquet. It's known as the wedding banquet that nobody wanted to go to. We're told that some did not come to the wedding banquet because of some undisclosed reason. Others, they had business and daily chores to do. And then there were those who just mistreated the slaves who had invited them and treated them poorly. And of course, as would be expected, this outraged the king. And so he sent his troops and killed those people, burned their city. And then he said, go out and invite anyone. Gather whoever you find. Doesn't matter their gender, doesn't matter their ability to pay or to offer up some gifts for the king. Since the wealthy and the elite would not come, I want you to get anybody. And so the wedding hall is filled so that the banquet can begin. Every Sunday, my friends, when we participate in Holy Communion, we set out a banquet. And we offer invitations for people to come to this banquet. Oh, we don't send out formal invitations, right? We aren't writing out cards every Sunday or every week to ask people to come that they might, something they might receive in the mail. Instead, we'd send out informal invitations, and that comes through individual packages, meaning the invitation is to come from you and from me. You see, God invites all people to the Lord's table, to the Lord's banquet. But the Lord depends on you and me, to get the invitation out. And when we don't, what we're doing, my friends, is we're walling people out. We're walling people away from the church. Walls do one thing, and that's they divide. That's their purpose. They keep some people out. They keep some people in. On our highways, there's a wall there to keep the noise out from the neighborhoods that are near the highway. Marathons, runners talk about hitting a wall, right? When all their energy and their strength and their electrolytes, all of that ceases, and so they can't go any farther. Others say that when their goals are blocked, they've hit a wall. We remember, of course, people my age remember the Berlin Wall being torn down that divided East Berlin and West Berlin for 28 years, right? But even in the church, we have walls. Archaeologists discovered part of the outer wall of Herod's temple back in, of course, in Jerusalem. The temple was destroyed sometime around 70 CE. The Roman army came in, destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple about 37 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But the inscription that they found on this wall, let me read it. It says, "No foreigner may enter within the wall which surrounds the sanctuary and enclosure. Anyone who is caught doing so will have himself to blame for his ensuing death." How do we put up walls in the church? Well, the unchurched tell us from studies that they have done that the unchurched hesitate to come to church because they think that there's certain information they need to know before they can come, or they have to have a certain amount of money that they can give before they can come. They believe it's necessary to know certain parts of the Bible, or they have to demonstrate some level of faith before they come in. Are those walls that we put up? Not necessarily. But there are walls that we do put up in the church. We kind of chuckle. Those of us who grew up in the church, those of us who have been in a church a long time, sort of chuckle when we hear this, that people think that they need to know something. And yet, we are a bit of a secret society, right? We have names for people like acolytes and lectors, and we do secret things like, well, you stand at certain times, you sit at certain times. We repeat things that a lot of people have memorized, like the Creed and the Lord's Prayer. And then we have this secret act of Holy Communion. Early in the development of the Christian church, people talked about Christians as being cannibals because they talked about eating the flesh of Christ and drinking his blood. Now we've dispelled that, for the last 1,500 years, thank God, and yet people still think that there are certain expectations that they have to meet before they can come to the Lord's table and join us. The definitive document of the ELCA about the practice that gives guidance for our sacraments is called the use of the means of grace. The use of the means of grace. It's a statement of practice of word and sacrament. Among other things, this document says, I want to read this: all of our congregations are encouraged to celebrate the Lord's Supper weekly, and admission to the sacrament is by invitation of the Lord, presented through the church to those who are baptized. So the Lord invites everyone to the heavenly banquet, the Lord's Supper. By tradition, we teach that an individual should have some level of faith in the church, including the need for baptism, so that they can faithfully receive Holy Communion. They don't have to demonstrate a certain degree of knowledge. They only need to be able to respond to the gift of Christ in the supper. Therefore, many congregations over the years, since the 70s, and on through probably the 80s and 90s, the churches, Lutheran churches, have lowered the age of First Communion. It used to be tied in with confirmation, but now it was third grade, then second grade, then first grade. So many congregations lowered that age, and it gave the freedom for the pastor and for the parents to make a decision about when a child was old enough to respond to this gift from Christ. So there's no particular age to be able to come to the banquet. It's up to the individual child and their development. And the reason that we allow this kind of freedom and discretion is because this is important. The efficacy of the sacrament does not depend on the level of knowledge of the person receiving the sacrament. In other words, it's not my faith that makes the sacrament of Holy Communion efficacious. It is Christ working through the elements and Christ's word. So if an unbaptized person receives Holy Communion, right, neither the individual nor the pastor need to be ashamed about this. Rather, we thank Christ for his open invitation and limitless mercy and love. But then we invite the individual to learn the teachings of the church, to learn the faith of the church, and then we invite them to be baptized. So, my friends, Christ the King has invited all people to this banquet of Holy Communion. And decisions and invitations need to be made, invitations need to be sent. If we make light of the invitation, deciding that we have nothing else, that we have other things that are more important to do, then I think we, like those invited guests that wouldn't come, we shame the King. You and I must assume the role of the servants to accept the invitation, yes, but also to go out and to seek others to fill God's church so that they will be able to participate in the Lord's banquet. And we don't go out just once, right? Just like the parable, individuals are sent again and again to gather people so that every time we leave the sanctuary, every time we leave this act of Holy Communion, we go into the community, we are sent out to invite others to join us for this heavenly banquet. In Ephesians 2:14, it says, He, Christ, is our peace. He has made us all one people and has broken down the dividing wall to reconcile us to God in one body through the cross. In other words, Christ came to remove the walls of separation, all barriers, So why do we have this desire in the church to wall other people out? Because we are not inviting them or not making them feel welcome. We need to be part of the King's invitation committee. We have to be willing to invite again and again and again. And even all of the excuses that we receive, we still continue to invite. And when invited, we need to come prepared. And by prepared, I mean we come to the Lord's table with an open heart to receive this amazing gift of grace. But also, as a church, we should have open doors, ready to welcome all people to the banquet. So that's my little gander at the gospel for this coming Sunday, October 11th. Like I said, it's the 19th Sunday after Pentecost. Thank you for listening to my little gander here. Remember, it's your faith is not so much the church you attend. It's not what theologian you follow. Your faith is a living, acting, breathing, living out your faith every day. You know, living out that amazing grace that Christ has given to us to share God's words of love, mercy, and grace with everyone that we encounter. Go out and be someone's thankful today. God bless you.